I found out my daughter was secretly intimate with my husband, and this broke my heart. Before I continue, if you are new to my channel, please subscribe to see more of my videos and also hit the like button if you find this interesting. Thank you. It was a crisp autumn morning in Atlanta, the kind that smelled like pumpkin spice and broken memories. I was in my kitchen, making coffee, when my daughter, Lily, called. She said she was coming to visit. Like she always did, once a year. No kids, no husband, no explanation. When she arrived, she looked different. Radiant, calm, and oddly familiar. There was a glow about her that reminded me of someone, my husband, Mark. We had been married for 24 years. He was the man who picked me up from nothing, helped me through nursing school, and built a quiet life with me in the suburbs. Or so I thought. That evening, after Lily went to bed, Mark's phone buzzed. He was in the shower. I didn't mean to check it, but something told me to. A message flashed. I miss your hands on me. The kids asked when Daddy's coming back. The sender's name burned into my eyes, Lily. I dropped the phone. My breath froze. My world collapsed quietly, in the space between disbelief and heartbreak. And that night, I decided I would find out everything. The next morning, I watched them. Every glance. Every touch. Mark pretended not to notice me watching, but I caught the tension in his jaw, the nervous laughter, the way he avoided Lily's eyes in front of me. Lily was my first child. I had her at 17, before I met Mark. He raised her like his own, or so I thought. That day, I followed Lily when she went shopping. She drove to Decatur, to a quiet suburban home. There, 2 little children ran to her, a boy and a girl. One of them had Mark's piercing green eyes. I stood frozen by the car, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight I thought I'd break it. She wasn't just hiding her kids. She was hiding his. My husband had been living a double life, one with me, and one with my own daughter. I drove home in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I planned. Because when you've been stabbed by love, the wound is too deep for noise. That night, I dug through old photo albums. My shaking fingers turned pages that once held laughter and Christmas memories. Every picture of Mark and Lily together suddenly looked different. The way he held her shoulder. The way she leaned into him. It wasn't fatherly. It was forbidden. I felt my soul splitting apart. I remembered when Lily stopped bringing friends home at 16, when Mark started working late shifts, when she went off to college and never brought a boyfriend home. Every lie had been perfectly folded into love. When Mark came to bed that night, I stared at him. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "I love you, Claire." And I whispered back, "I know." Because I needed him to believe I was still blind. For now. I began pretending. Breakfasts. Laughter. Movie nights. But beneath every smile was venom. I told Mark I was going to visit my sister in Houston for 2 weeks. He believed me. Instead, I flew to Los Angeles, where Lily lived. I rented a small apartment a few blocks away from hers and started watching. Every day, Mark showed up there, holding her hand, carrying groceries, kissing her at the door. I filmed everything. Every single thing. And when I finally saw their kids, my grandkids, calling him daddy, my heart shattered into dust. But I wasn't just a broken woman. I was becoming a storm. It took 3 weeks to gather everything. Pictures. Videos. Messages. Then, I set the perfect stage. On Lily's birthday, I flew back to Atlanta and threw her a surprise family dinner. Mark sat at the head of the table. Lily was glowing. Everyone was smiling. Halfway through dessert, I stood up and said, "I made a little video for Lily, a surprise tribute." The room darkened. The projector flickered. And there it was. Mark and Lily. Holding hands. Kissing. Their children laughing in the background. Gasps filled the room. Lily's fork clattered to the floor. Mark turned white as snow. I smiled. Calmly. "Happy birthday, darling," I said. Then I added softly, "To both of you, may you choke on your lies." And I walked away, leaving them to choke on the silence they created. The next morning, the world around me felt quieter, almost too quiet. My phone buzzed endlessly. Friends. Family. Neighbors. Everyone had seen the video I'd accidentally uploaded to Facebook before leaving the dinner. It went viral across our small Atlanta community overnight. People whispered. The church group Mark led disbanded. Lily's coworkers resigned from her boutique. And me? I sat by my window with a cup of coffee, finally tasting peace. Mark called over and over. I didn't answer. When Lily finally showed up at my door, her face was streaked with tears. "Mom, please, let us explain," she whispered. "Explain what?" I said softly. "How long you've been sleeping with your mother's husband? Or how those two innocent children have my husband's blood?" She sobbed. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." I smiled faintly. "You're right. It wasn't supposed to happen at all." And I shut the door in her face. Mark was fired from his job at the real estate firm in downtown Atlanta. The scandal was too much for his partners to handle. Meanwhile, Lily lost everything: her clients, her boutique lease, and her reputation. They moved out of the fancy apartment I'd once helped them pay rent for and into a small 2-bedroom unit on the outskirts of Marietta. I found out because I wanted to. Every humiliation, every downfall, I watched quietly. But revenge isn't always destruction. Sometimes, it's silence. I refused to speak to them. I refused to even hate them out loud. Instead, I focused on me. I joined a nursing outreach in Houston, working with single mothers. I found purpose again. But still, some nights, I'd lie awake replaying Lily's words, "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." And I'd whisper into the darkness. "Then how was it supposed to happen, my darling?" 6 months later, I received a letter. It was from Lily. No phone calls this time. Just trembling handwriting. "Mom, I know you hate me. But I'm sick. I have breast cancer. Stage 2. The doctors say I need surgery soon. Please. I need you. The kids need you. I'm begging you." For the first time in months, my heart ached, not from anger, but from something heavier. I packed a small bag and flew to Los Angeles, where she had moved for treatment. When I saw her, she looked frail, shadows under her eyes, her hair thinning. Mark was there too, looking broken. "Claire," he said softly. "You don't have to forgive us. But please, help us." I looked at Lily lying on the hospital bed. The child I once carried. The woman who carried my husband's children. I took a deep breath and said, "I'll help her. But not for you." And that was the moment my revenge began to take a different shape. Over the next few weeks, I helped with her treatment, quietly, gracefully. I paid the hospital bills she couldn't afford anymore. I cooked. I cleaned. I became her strength, even as she could barely look me in the eyes. Mark kept trying to talk, but I always walked away. One evening, Lily whispered, "Mom. I can't believe after all I did, you're still here." I looked at her and said, "I didn't come to heal you. I came to remind you of what love looks like, so when you face yourself, you'll know the difference between love and lust." Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, I saw regret, not just fear. That night, she cried herself to sleep. And I stayed beside her, holding the same hand that once betrayed me. Because true justice isn't always revenge, it's realization. Months passed. Lily got better. But Mark's guilt grew heavier. He started drinking, heavily. One night, he showed up at my apartment door in tears. "I've lost everything, Claire. The house, my family, my soul. Please, help me start over. I looked at him calmly and said. Start over? You burned down everything I built. You didn't just cheat, you chose my child. My blood. You deserve to start from nothing. He fell to his knees. Please, forgive me. I leaned down and whispered. I did. The day I realized your pain will last longer than my hate. A week later, I met with my lawyer. I rewrote my will. Everything, my house, my savings, my estate, would go to Lily's children. But under one condition, neither Lily nor Mark could access a dime until they were both gone. That was justice. Not loud. Not cruel. Just, final. A year passed. Lily was in remission, though weaker. Mark had disappeared into cheap motels and liquor bottles. One Sunday afternoon, I received a call from Texas. It was a motel manager. Mark had been found unconscious, alcohol poisoning. He didn't make it. When I arrived to collect his belongings, I found one thing folded neatly on the bed, my old black funeral dress. The same one I wore when my mother died. There was a note. You were always the strong one, Claire. I destroyed everything I touched. Maybe death will finally make me faithful. I didn't cry. I just folded the note and placed it inside my purse. Sometimes, grief feels like a quiet wind, it passes through, and you keep walking. But I knew Lily didn't deserve to learn about it from a stranger. I had to face her again. When I got to Los Angeles, Lily was sitting outside her clinic, her scarf fluttering in the wind. She looked fragile, like someone running out of time. Is it him? She asked as soon as she saw my face. I nodded. He's gone. She didn't cry, not the way I expected. Instead, she whispered, maybe that's mercy. I sat beside her. Lily, you need to start over. For your kids. For yourself. She smiled weakly. Mom, I don't think I'll have that chance. Her voice cracked, and I felt a chill. What do you mean? The cancer's back. Stage 4. My throat tightened. The ground beneath me felt hollow. She looked at me and said, I guess this is what love did to me, it killed me slowly. The next few months were a blur of hospital rooms and sleepless nights. I became her caretaker again, just like when she was a baby. She would whisper sometimes in her sleep, Daddy, don't go, and it broke me anew each night. One evening, she looked at me and said, Mom, when I'm gone, please raise them right. Don't let them know what I did. Let them remember me as your daughter, not your mistake. I held her hand tightly. No one deserves to carry the sins of their parents, I said. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Mom, do you still hate me? I smiled through mine. I stopped hating you the day I realized hate keeps them alive inside you. I chose peace instead. She closed her eyes, whispering, You always loved, better than me. And I stayed by her side until the heart monitor went still. Her funeral was quiet, just me, her children, and a few nurses from the oncology ward. As they lowered her into the earth beneath a weeping willow, her son, barely 8, asked, Grandma, will Mommy wake up soon? I knelt down, holding him close. No, sweetheart. But she's sleeping somewhere peaceful. She loved you more than anything. He nodded softly. Then I'll dream of her every night. I kissed his forehead and whispered, that's all she'd want. Later that week, I officially adopted both children. The court approved it easily, there was no one left to object. I moved us back to Atlanta, to a small, sunlit home filled with laughter again. But every now and then, when I'd pass by Lily's picture, I'd whisper, You're free now, my child. But I hope wherever you are, you've learned that love built on lies always buries itself. 6 months later, while rearranging Lily's things, I found a hidden box beneath her dresser. Inside were letters, dozens of them, addressed to me. The first one stopped my heart. Mom, I never meant to love him. It started when I was 17. I didn't know it was wrong until it was too late. He told me you'd left him, that you had someone else. I believed him. I was stupid, blinded by comfort. By the time I realized, I was already pregnant. I wanted to tell you 1,000 times, but shame kept me silent. I sat on the floor for hours, tears streaming down my face. So it wasn't just betrayal, it was manipulation. Mark had started it. She had been a child. The final truth shattered me, but it also freed me. Because now, I knew who truly deserved my vengeance. And though he was gone, I could still destroy his legacy. After reading Lily's letters, I couldn't sleep. My mind spun with every detail, the manipulation, the grooming, the deceit. Mark hadn't just betrayed me, he'd stolen my daughter's innocence. A week later, I met with his old law firm in Dallas, where he had managed multiple real estate projects. They told me something strange. Mark had millions tied up in offshore accounts under a fake company name, LNL Investments. LNL? I repeated slowly. Lily Ann. Mark, the manager said awkwardly. It hit me like thunder. He'd built his empire on the initials of their sin. But fate has a funny way of giving the righteous one last move. Because as his legal spouse, I was the next of kin, the only one who could claim every dollar. I left that office with the papers in my hand, my heart calm and cold. It was time to make sure that every cent of his empire would serve the people he'd destroyed. I returned to Atlanta and called my lawyer. I want to open a foundation, I said. For abused and manipulated young women. Name it the Lily Foundation. We used Mark's fortune to buy shelters, fund therapy centers, and sponsor college education for survivors. Every building bore a plaque that read, "Funded by the sins of one, redeemed by the love of another." The press loved the story. Local news outlets called me the widow who turned pain into power. But I never told them the full truth. Some stories are too sacred, too cruel, to fit in a headline. Late one night, I stood in the lobby of the first shelter. Lily's picture hung on the wall, smiling. I gave your pain a purpose, I whispered. Now it'll heal others. For the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. Months later, during Sunday service at a small church in Atlanta, a young woman approached me. Her name was Emily. She looked no older than 20. She said, "Mrs. Turner, I think I knew your husband. He was my real estate mentor in Dallas years ago." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "He used to tell me how lonely he was, how his wife didn't understand him. I left the company after she stopped, swallowing hard, after he made a move on me." The blood drained from my face. Even after destroying my family, Mark had continued his sickness. But what Emily said next froze me. "He had another account, one under your name. I think he meant to hide it from you." Another secret. Another lie. I thanked her quietly, masking my rage with grace. Because the dead can't hide forever, not from truth. I hired a private investigator to trace the second account. He found a storage unit registered to my name in San Diego. Inside were boxes of old tapes, photos, and documents. But one tape caught my eye, labeled Truth. I played it. Mark's voice filled the room. "If you're watching this, Claire, I guess I'm gone. I never meant for it to go this far. Lily reminded me of you, the way you used to look at me before life hardened you. I convinced myself it wasn't wrong. But deep down, I knew I was crossing a line I could never uncross." He paused. "Maybe I destroyed you both because I hated seeing what I'd become, a man unworthy of love." I sat there, staring at the screen. There were no tears left, only silence. He confessed. But too late for redemption. I ejected the tape, placed it back into the box, and whispered, "Your truth doesn't save you, Mark. It saves me." The following month, I organized a charity auction. Real estate investors, politicians, and donors filled the ballroom of the Hilton Atlanta. The event's theme, from betrayal to benevolence. I sold every last property Mark owned, including the house we once shared. When the final bid closed, I stood at the microphone and said, "Tonight, every dollar raised will shelter a girl who once believed love meant silence. And to the man whose lies funded this, may your sins build more homes than your hands ever could." The crowd applauded, unaware that they were clapping for a grave turned into grace. As the lights dimmed, I looked toward the heavens and whispered, "Lily, it's done." Years passed. My home was no longer silent, it was filled with laughter again. Lily's children, Noah and Grace, grew fast. They called me Grandma Claire, unaware of the story buried beneath their name. But children are curious by nature. One summer evening, Noah, now 12, asked, "Grandma, why don't we ever talk about Grandpa Mark?" The air grew still. I looked into his eyes, the same eyes his grandfather once used to manipulate love. I took a deep breath and said, "Because sometimes, sweetheart, people we love make choices that break the people around them. And when that happens, the kindest thing we can do is remember their lessons, not their mistakes." He nodded slowly, then hugged me. "Then I'll remember the good parts," he said softly. Tears filled my eyes. He didn't know it, but he had just redeemed generations of pain, with innocence alone. A few months later, a journalist from Los Angeles reached out. She had heard of the Lilly Foundation and wanted to create a short documentary about its origins. She asked gently, "Mrs. Turner, may we talk about what inspired you to start this?" I paused. I could have told her the raw truth, betrayal, incest, manipulation, but some truths don't need headlines, they need healing. I said, "I once loved deeply and lost painfully. But I learned that real strength isn't in revenge. It's in rebuilding, and letting broken things grow into blessings." The documentary aired on national TV. Donations poured in. Survivors wrote letters saying my story gave them courage. That night, I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Do you see this, Lily? Your name is saving lives now." 5 years later, I received an unexpected call from a real estate agent in Atlanta. "The old Turner house is back on the market," he said. "Would you like to see it?" I hesitated, then agreed. When I walked through those familiar doors, memories flooded in, the smell of cinnamon, the sound of Mark's laughter, Lily's teenage footsteps echoing through the hall. The ghosts of my past lived in every wall, but they no longer haunted me. I walked into the master bedroom, once the heart of my heartbreak, and whispered, "I forgive you both." Because forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. As I left, I looked back one last time and said, "Goodbye, home. You saw everything, but you'll remember peace now." Then I signed the deed, donating it to the Lilly Foundation as a women's recovery home. At 63, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to receive a National Humanitarian Award. As I stood on the grand stage, lights flashing, the announcer said, "Claire Turner, a woman who turned betrayal into a legacy of hope." The applause was thunderous. But my eyes weren't on the cameras. They were on Noah and Grace, now teenagers, sitting in the front row. I could see the pride in their faces, pure, untainted, real. During my speech, I said, "I once thought justice meant making others pay. But true justice is peace, when the pain that broke you becomes the bridge that saves others." The crowd rose in ovation. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely seen, not as a victim, not as a widow, but as a woman reborn. On my 70th birthday, I wrote a letter to Noah and Grace, to be opened when I was gone. It read, "My dearest ones. You were both born from a painful story, but pain isn't where your story ends, it's where it begins. Your mother made mistakes, your grandfather did worse, but their blood also gave you life, and that life is pure. Use it well. If you ever wonder how I forgave, remember this, forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering without hate. Love, Grandma Claire." Years later, when I passed quietly in my sleep, they found that letter framed on my nightstand. At my funeral, Noah spoke through tears. She was proof that love can survive anything. even betrayal. And as they buried me beside Lily, the sun broke through the clouds, warm, golden, forgiving. Because in the end, justice wasn't revenge. It was redemption. Moral message. Pain may shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. Justice without hatred is the highest form of revenge. Thank you for watching my story. Please like, subscribe to my channel to see more interesting videos.